Have you ever found yourself in scary situations that defy rational explanation? In my bedroom, there was a small door that led to the attic. I lived there from the ages of 11 to 13. At some point, it became routine for me to close the door a couple of times a week when I entered my room. I didn't think much of it, I just assumed my mom forgot to close it when she came down from the attic. After a while, I made a fatal mistake by joking about it. When my mom scolded me for leaving things scattered around, I said, every evening, I have to close the attic door behind me. Maybe you should start doing it yourself. She informed me that she hadn't been up to the attic in months. I asked my brother, he hadn't been there either. I asked my dad, and it was the same story. After that, I started paying more attention to it. I checked if the door was closed in the morning, after school, before dinner, and after dinner. When I went to bed, the door was open. For about 2 months, I pondered, made assumptions, and conducted experiments. I decided I might figure something out if I left the door open. I opened it before going to school, checked it right after school, it was still open. I checked after dinner, still open. I checked before going to bed, still open. Lying in bed, I couldn't sleep because I was thinking only about that open door. I decided to check what was going on. I turned toward the attic door and saw a face staring at me. I bolted downstairs, woke up my parents, and my brother laughed at me. We switched rooms, and 6 months later, we moved to a bigger house. Our old house was bought by our new physics teacher and his wife. I could have forgotten all this or chalked it up to a vivid childhood imagination, but in my last year of school, I learned that our physics teacher was awesome. Physics became my favorite subject, and he became my favorite teacher. At the end of the year, my friend and I took our video camera and went around town filming silly things. That's how we ended up in front of our old house and decided to see what it looked like inside. It was interesting to walk through it and film everything. I talked about all the things my dad had built that the new owners hadn't changed. Then the physics teacher's wife took us upstairs to show us the room she had turned into her sewing workshop. I jokingly asked, "Have you noticed anything strange in this room?" Her face turned white as a sheet, right on camera. She asked what I meant. I tried to brush it off with a joke, but I ended up telling her about the attic door. She said that every time she comes to sew, the door is open. Then she told us that on the second day after they moved in, their German Shepherd ran into the room but refused to leave. He started barking uncontrollably and couldn't be calmed. Then he jumped out the window, landed on the porch roof, and ran off. He didn't return until the next day and has never gone near that room since. At first, I wanted to show the video to my parents and brother, but then I decided it was better not to worry them. I had a dream that I was being choked, and when I woke up, I found my hands wrapped around my own neck. My God, this brought back memories that hadn't surfaced in a long time. I had a bad dream and woke up because my wrists actually hurt. It turned out my boyfriend at the time had tightly grabbed my wrists because I was trying to strangle him in my sleep. He had to fight to free himself from my grip. I still don't understand why I tried to strangle him. I live in a condominium, and we have 2 apartments, one on the 7th floor and another on the 8th. To get from one to the other, you need to go out into the hallway and take the elevator or stairs. One evening, we ran out of ice cream upstairs, and my mom told me to go downstairs where the freezer was. I took the keys, went to the 7th floor, and since it was dinner time, there was no one around. It was very dark, but I noticed someone sitting on the couch. I turned on the light and saw my dad sitting there. It was a bit strange, but I went to the freezer to get the ice cream and asked if he had the keys. He didn't respond. I shrugged and thought, since he got in and locked the door behind him, he must have the keys. I went back upstairs and saw my dad sitting at the table, eating dinner. I got scared and asked him how the heck he got upstairs so fast. But everyone said in unison that he hadn't gone anywhere the whole time I was downstairs. I said it was impossible because I had just seen him downstairs, but no one believed me. I don't go downstairs alone anymore. During my university years, I lived alone in a small, cozy studio apartment in a decent neighborhood. I could easily go to a 24-hour supermarket or McDonald's in the middle of the night. This often happened after midnight or even until 3 a.m. because I'm a night owl. One night, I was writing until 2 a.m. and realized I was hungry. I didn't have any ingredients to cook something, so I decided to go to the supermarket to buy a pie or something else. As soon as I opened the door, an overwhelming sense of fear hit me. My heart started pounding, and I began to tremble. I tried to convince myself it was nonsense and stepped out, determined to go no matter what. But I didn't get far. A terror I couldn't explain gripped me, and I couldn't overcome it. I ran back inside and decided to make do with dry cereal. The next day, I learned that a few drunk men had started a fight at the intersection near the supermarket and beat up someone from my university. I can't explain it, but I feel like if I had ignored that fear and gone to the store that night, something terrible might have happened to me. When I was in school, I was hanging out with a friend in the schoolyard during a break. He was shooting hoops, and I was sitting on the asphalt playing my Nintendo DS. I remember he asked me if I thought he could make a shot from half-court. I told him, without looking up from my game, that he should try but probably wouldn't make it. Suddenly, my dad asked me, "What are you talking about?" I looked around and realized I was sitting on the living room carpet next to my dad, and it was already dark outside. I was in the same position, playing the same game, on the same level, standing at the same spot in the game. Nothing else unusual happened that evening, but I didn't tell anyone about it. Now, when I think back, it scares me. For a long time, I thought it was just a dream, but now I realize it didn't feel like a dream at all, and I never remember my dreams so vividly. When I was 6, I had a cat named Buster. Actually, he was my stepdad's cat, but since I'd never had a cat before, I considered Buster mine. I should say that Buster didn't like being hugged or bothered by little kids, so he hated me. He avoided me as much as he could. Plus, we didn't keep him indoors all the time, so he spent most of the day outside and only came back in the evening. One evening, Buster didn't come home. We always fed him in the evenings, so I got worried. Also, there were a lot of coyotes in our area. My parents carefully avoided talking about his disappearance, but I didn't pick up on their hints. That night, as I was falling asleep, Buster jumped onto my bed. He lay down next to my head and let me pet him until I fell asleep. Honestly, I was shocked because he had never done that before. The next day, I happily went downstairs and bragged to my parents that I knew Buster loved me because he slept next to me that night. My parents looked puzzled, sat me down, and told me that the previous night, they had gone outside and found Buster's body behind the house. They said he had been killed by a coyote and was definitely dead, so he couldn't have been on my bed that night. To this day, I prefer to think that Buster just wanted to say goodbye to me and thank me for loving him as best I could as a naive child. I'm certain that the house I lived in for a while was haunted. Strange things happened. For example, I always felt like someone was watching me when I was alone in a room with the hallway door open. I swear, I often saw someone pass by my room out of the corner of my eye. We had 2 cats, and sometimes they slept in my bedroom. Sometimes, both would suddenly jump up and stare at the door, sitting like that for a long time. This happened often. In our bathroom, there was a shelf where my sister kept her makeup. One day, all the items on that shelf fell into the sink, which was about 5 centimeters away from the shelf. The shelf itself didn't fall, it stayed in place, so it seemed like my sister's makeup somehow jumped into the sink. One night, my sister's dresser, which was about 100 years old, if not more, and given to her by our grandmother, just tipped over. The dresser was very heavy and sturdy as a tank. My sister admitted she heard a sound like someone pushing it. My mom and sister often scolded me for sneaking around the house quietly and scaring them, but when it happened, I wasn't actually home, or I was in my room. They said they saw the shadow of a man about my height. One day, we met the previous owner, and my mom casually asked if anything strange had happened in the house when she lived there. The woman started crying and said no one believed her, but strange things happened often. Around that time, I moved out of that house and haven't regretted it for a second. Many years ago, my mom started dating a guy, let's call him JB. A few months later, he invited my mom, my brother, and me to spend the weekend with him and his son at his lake house. It was located on Lake Michigan in a less populated area, which was really cool. We arrived, and I suddenly felt a sense of fear. It was a small 2-story house, 3 stories if you count the attic. The first floor had a living room, dining room, and kitchen, and the second had 2 bedrooms. The house was built by JB's grandfather, who lived there most of his life working as a tailor in a nearby town. We went up to the attic to get beach supplies that JB stored there so he wouldn't have to bring them every time. When we went up, I noticed 8 mannequins in the corner, covered in dust and cobwebs. Some were full body, others just torsos. Considering a tailor had lived in the house, it wasn't surprising. JB's son and I slept on the couch in the living room since there weren't enough beds. Around midnight, I heard the stairs creaking. I thought it was my mom checking if we were asleep, so I told JB's son to be quiet, turned off the TV, and pulled the blanket over myself. For a few minutes, everything was silent. I peeked out from under the blanket and saw 3 mannequins moving around the kitchen. Their arms and heads didn't move, just their bodies glided through the kitchen. I was half asleep by then, but it scared me so much that I let out a quiet squeal, buried myself under the blanket, and then heard them getting closer. Eventually, I saw one standing a meter away from us. I hid under the blanket and shut my eyes tightly, hoping they wouldn't touch us. The next day, I tried not to think about it, hoping it was just a bad dream. But when we went back to the attic to return the beach stuff, we saw the mannequins were in different positions, and there was no dust or cobwebs on them anymore. Believe it or not, it really happened, and since then, I've been terrified of mannequins. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new, super interesting discussions. In the meantime, check out our other videos.